Gazans fled and sought shelter on Thursday as Israeli forces advanced into the ruins of Rafah. What they are doing to us is unjust. It is a shame. This is not a life. Every day we are moving from one place to another, this woman said. Israel's assault to capture the city is part of a newly announced security zone they intended to seize, and is a major escalation in the war, which began with a Hamas attack on Israeli communities on October 7, 2023. Israel restarted the conflict last month after effectively abandoning a ceasefire in place since January. A day after declaring their intention to capture large swaths of the crowded enclave, Israeli forces pushed into the city. Rafah had served as a last refuge for people fleeing other areas for much of the war. Gaza's health ministry reported at least 97 people killed in Israeli strikes in the past 24 hours. Later on Thursday, local health authorities said an Israeli airstrike killed at least 27 Palestinians, including women and children, at a school serving as a shelter. The Israeli military said the attack hit key Palestinian terrorists. Footage released by the Israeli military on Wednesday showed troops operating in southern Gaza and airstrikes on what is said to be terrorist infrastructure. Reuters was not able to independently verify the location and date the video was filmed. Gazans who had returned to homes in the ruins during the ceasefire have now been ordered to flee communities on the northern and southern edges of the Strip. They fear Israel intends to depopulate those areas indefinitely, leaving hundreds of thousands homeless while Israel seizes some of Gaza's last agricultural land and critical water infrastructure. Israel has not spelled out its long-term aims for the security zone its troops are now seizing. Its stated goal since the start of the war has been the destruction of the Hamas militant group, which ran Gaza for nearly 2 decades.
If you live anywhere here in the red circled area and you have an old...
South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol was ousted from office on Friday over his short-lived attempt at martial law. The Constitutional Court's 8 justices ruled unanimously to uphold Parliament's motion to impeach Yoon. The turmoil set off since his surprise declaration of martial law last year sparked the country's worst political crisis in decades. On Friday, the court's acting Chief Justice said Yoon violated his duty as president by taking actions that were beyond the powers given to him under the Constitution. Cheers erupted from thousands of anti-Yoon protesters upon hearing the ruling. There have been months of protests, both in support of Yoon and of his removal, after his martial law decree in December. He has said it was needed to root out, quote, anti-state elements. Yoon lifted the decree 6 hours later after lawmakers defied efforts by security forces to seal off Parliament and then voted to reject it. Yoon has said he never intended to fully impose emergency military rule and tried to downplay the fallout. He argued he was trying to sound the alarm over the main opposition party's abuse of its parliamentary majority. The Constitutional Court rejected most of his argument, saying there were legal avenues to address disagreements. A lawyer for Yoon told reporters on Friday that the court's ruling was legally implausible and, quote, a political decision. On Friday, it remained unclear if the political chaos that has unfolded since December will now be eased by the court ruling. A presidential election is now required to take place within 60 days, according to the country's constitution. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will continue to serve as acting president until a new leader is inaugurated. In January, Yoon became the first sitting South Korean president to be arrested. The 64-year-old also faces a separate criminal trial on insurrection charges.
Residents of the separatist enclave of white Afrikaners in South Africa want US President Donald Trump to help them become a state. A group of them was so opposed to majority black rule when apartheid ended some 3 decades ago, they carved out the enclave. Orania, population 3,000, is the only town in South Africa where all residents, including menial workers, are white. Last week, community leaders visited the United States, seeking recognition as an autonomous entity. Orania movement leader Just Strijdom, surrounded by bronzes of past Afrikaner leaders, including from the era of racist white minority rule, had a message for those stateside.
If whomever is interested in helping create Orania's future, we think investment is a good opportunity. Our message to the American government was help us here, 3-word response. It was not to say help us here by giving us American tax dollars so that we can just, do whatever.
Trump offered in February to resettle white South African farmers and their families as refugees. Stridham said that wasn't the point.
We are glad that we are recognized as a people, but we don't want to be refugees in another man's land.
South African authorities acknowledge Orania as a town that can raise local taxes and deliver services. The 8,000-hectare settlement is riding an unprecedented wave of support from right-wing Americans for Afrikaner nationalists who lost power when apartheid ended in 1994 and Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. 3 senior Orania officials interviewed by Reuters were vague about the help they sought in the United States. They said they wanted investment to build houses to keep up with its 15% population growth, infrastructure and energy independence. Stridham declined to say whether his delegation had contact with the Trump administration. The US State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Political analyst Nikki Falkoff believes Afrikaner groups want a return to apartheid.
I think for a long time Orania and people around that kind of politics have been relatively careful about how they portray themselves. And they have made a big effort to go, we're just living peaceably side by side with our neighbors of other colors. We choose to only be white people, but that's okay because this is our space and we
Political analyst Nikki Falkoff believes Afrikaner groups want a return to apartheid.
I think for a long time Orania and people around that kind of politics have been relatively careful about how they portray themselves. And they have made a big effort to go, we're just living peaceably side by side with our neighbors of other colors. We choose to only be white people, but that's okay because this is our space and we will live in this way. And what's happened now, I think, has emboldened them slightly more to go, no, well, actually, we would like apartheid back, please.
Some US right-wingers have sought to align with Afrikaners in their opposition to diversity policies. South Africa's black empowerment laws have been ridiculed by Trump's South African-born advisor, Elon Musk. A third of all South Africans are out of work, most of them poor blacks.
All the spending we have seen on AI doesn't actually lead to any revenue.
Bump in the road as first quarter deliveries fell 13%. That's according to figures released Wednesday. The electric vehicle giant was hurt by a backlash against CEO Elon Musk's political stance. And it was also hit by rising competition and its aging lineup of electric vehicles. Tesla delivered 336,681 vehicles in the first quarter, well below analyst expectations. That was down from close to 387,000 a year ago. Musk had pledged a return to growth after Tesla's annual deliveries dipped last year. But his advisory role to US President Donald Trump has led to discontent among some customers. Musk has been instrumental in firing thousands of federal workers and cutting humanitarian aid. Protests at Tesla stores in the US and Europe have spiked, and Tesla cars have been vandalized. Some data also points to a rise in Tesla owners trading in their vehicles. Investors are waiting to see if refreshed models like the Model Y and incentives have helped counter weak demand and tough competition from Chinese and European rivals. A trade body said China's BYD could overtake Tesla as the top global EV seller for the first time this year, with a 15.7% market share.
Is one of the most important ones that we have done in the past 2 years. This protest, with the restarting, the resumption of the genocide, with the ethnic cleansing plans that Trump alongside the US are drawing up for Gaza to displace the people of Gaza, with the attacks in the West Bank, with the attacks on the student movement and the Palestine movement here, this march is our opportunity to show Trump, to show Netanyahu, to show Zionists, the Zionist entity and Zionist institutions everywhere, that the people will not stop. The people will not stop. You will not tire us out. The Palestine movement, the Palestinian people have survived 100 years of occupation, right? 77 years of colonization. In the US, the Palestine movement has survived arrests, has survived attacks, has survived infiltration, abduction, all of these tactics that they have taken, all of these measures that they have taken in order to try to stop our movement. Now is the time for us to stand up and show them that it will not work. They can keep trying, but it will not work. And it will not work because, again, we are determined. We will continue to fight for the liberation of Palestine.
Asked about on Air Force One and confirmed that, yes, the lady who thinks 9/11 was an inside job, who was banned by Uber and Lyft for her anti-Muslim tirades, who chained herself outside the doors of Twitter when she was banned from that, does give the president recommendations, and sometimes he does listen.
Laura Loomer is a very good patriot. She is a very strong person, and I saw her yesterday for a little while. She makes recommendations of things and people, and sometimes I listen to those recommendations.
What did she recommend?
She recommended certain people for jobs.
Adding to the administration, not
adding.
Who did she recommend? Firing?
Well, she'll recommend that too.
Did she have anything to do with the NSC aides who were ousted?
No, not her.
Do you know how many, sir? Do you know how many from the NSC?
Not many.
Was it 5, a dozen?
I really don't know.
He doesn't seem to care that much either way or be that checked in. Now, the President of the United States said right there that he does not know who was actually fired. Well, we now know that as many as 6 people were fired, including, get this, the chief of the National Security Agency and the deputy director. And then, guess what? In a lengthy post, Laura Loomer took credit for all, claiming, as she had said in the Oval Office meeting, they had been disloyal to Trump. The NSA director was fired for being handpicked by General Milley, who was accused of committing treason by President Trump. Senator Andy Kim is a Democrat in New Jersey. Before he was elected to Congress, he was a career public service, serving the Pentagon, the State Department, and on the White House National Security Council, and he joins me now. Senator, this feels like a kind of bad fever dream or like a bit of parody, but it's real. What is your reaction to finding out this individual has essentially firing power, even over someone who's the head of the National Security Agency?
Yeah, Chris, it would be absurd and hilarious if it wasn't so scary, in terms of how it actually manifests here. I mean, I worked at the National Security Council for 2 years. The National Security Council is supposed to be the best of the best. It's supposed to be, part and part a quarterback and a flight control in terms of everything that is happening in foreign policy. In fact, it used to be said that nothing could get to the president about foreign policy unless it went through the National Security Council, which clearly now is no longer the case, as apparently Laura Loomer has an ability to be able to get to the president about foreign policy. And that's just so alarming. And to the point that you had with your previous segment, if you want to know why there's so much chaos and confusion about what happened with regards to the tariffs, I can say it's because of the absolute dysfunction of this National Security Council, as demonstrated by what just happened with Laura Loomer.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We're showing Laura Loomer and the president, who do seem to be quite close. Why do you say that? Why do you say that there's some relationship between the sort of organizational dysfunction and then these crazy outcomes like the genuinely ludicrous chart that the president came out with?
Yeah, so the National Security Council, it doesn't handle everything in our foreign policy. What it handles is it determines what needs to go to the president for a decision, and it runs the process by which to shape that decision making that the president is going to have to do. So absolutely, for instance, with the tariffs, that is something that needs to go to the president for a decision, and it's very clear that that process was absolutely dysfunctional. In fact, was probably filled with people like like Peter Navarro, Laura Loomer, and others as well, feeding into the president's mindsets about this and not actually listen to a lot of the experts that we have throughout our government. People like General Howe, who was just fired at the National Security Agency. And when you hear Laura Loomer talk about him, she talks about him as someone who was appointed by Biden. Like, she has no idea what it means to be a career public servant, to someone who has served under both Republicans and Democrats. Like myself, I served under Bush and Obama, but she has no idea. She can't fathom the idea that someone would serve the country and not be loyal or pledge fealty to a particular president.
Yeah, just to put up General Howe's quick bio, he was head of the U.S. Cyber Command. He had 30 years of military service, commander of 16th Air Force in San Antonio. A very distinguished, long career, and I think a sort of nonpartisan figure. You're in the Senate right now because the Republicans are having a kind of vote-a-rama to set up their big tax bill. And this relates back to the tariffs, I think. My understanding, honestly, is that one way to make sense of the total chaos and insanity of what's the largest tax hike ever unilaterally imposed by an American president, as far as I can tell, is that he wants that so that he can then cut taxes for rich folks. And the Senate Republicans are sort of starting the ball rolling towards that process tonight. Is that how you understand what's going on here?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's an equation here as well to be looked at, and what you see on one side is you see, as you said, the largest tax cut. I mean, this massive tax this massive tax with the tariffs that is now put on the American people in a regressive way that's going to hurt so many families struggling. You add that to that, the gutting of Medicaid, which is what the Republicans are trying to do here at the Senate tonight. And what is that in service of? It's not meant to try to, bring down the deficit or anything that resembles financial responsibility. It's going to go to tax cuts, $4.5 trillion in tax cuts to billionaires that are, that have so much money. They have, their own space program individually. It's like one of those things where I can't stress to the American people enough to really follow the money here and see what is happening. They are taking our hard-earned money through these tariffs, the tax that is just levied by the president, through this effort that we're going to be here probably till 4 or 5 a.m. tonight, trying to do our best to highlight and show to the American people what is happening right before us, that they're going after people with disabilities, seniors and long-term care, nursing homes. 1 out of every 3 kids in my home state in New Jersey gets their care through Medicaid. That is what they're trying to take away in order to give Elon Musk a bigger tax break.
Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey, thank you for taking a little time with us tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
Still to come, Donald Trump shirks one of his most sacred duties as commander-in-chief for golf and an expensive dinner with donors. Next.
There's nobody that has more respect for not only our military, but for people that gave their lives in the military.
That was Donald Trump in the White House back in 2020, looking considerably younger, denying a report by Atlantic editor Jeffrey Goldberg. The president had refused to visit a cemetery for Americans' war dead in France, and that he had called fallen American soldiers losers and suckers. Last week, Trump was in the White House responding to Goldberg's latest bombshell story about Goldberg getting added to that infamous Signal chat in which Trump's vice president, defense secretary, national security advisor, head of intelligence texted classified war plans and emojis. But as Trump was spinning, he got blindsided by another national security question.
You use Signal, and we use Signal, and everybody uses Signal, but it could be a defective platform, and we're going to have to find that out.
Have you been briefed about soldiers in Lithuania?
Say it?
Have you been briefed about the soldiers in Lithuania who are missing?
No, I haven't.
No, I haven't. Commander-in-Chief had apparently not yet heard the news. 4 soldiers of the 3rd Infantry Division and their 63-ton armored vehicle had gone missing during a training mission with NATO allies in Lithuania. The following day, search teams found that armored vehicle. It had gone into a swamp and fallen 15 feet underwater. All 4 of those soldiers, ranging in age from 21 to 28, died in that accident. Eventually, the president was looped in. But instead of receiving the remains of the American soldiers when they arrived home today for a dignified transfer, Trump hit the links for a Saudi-backed LIV golf tournament at his Doral Resort and Golf Course in Florida. And after that, according to CBS News, Trump was set to host a $1 million a person candlelight dinner tonight at his Mar-a-Lago resort to benefit a MAGA super PAC. It would, of course, cost Donald Trump nothing to simply give the appearance that he cares more about America's fallen service members than he obviously does. It would have taken little effort for him to take the short trip from the White House to receive them at Dover Air Force Base. Evidently, he had other priorities. In fact, the President of the United States, who says nobody cares more about America's fallen heroes, couldn't be bothered to show those soldiers the same respect they got from the people of Lithuania. This was the scene Thursday in the streets of Vilnius, the Lithuanian capital, as NATO troops joined hundreds of residents, including school children, the nation's president, to line the streets, waving American flags, forming an impromptu honor guard to see off the motorcade carrying those 4 soldiers back home to America. Their names are Private First Class Dante Taitano from Guam, 21 years old, Staff Sergeant Edwin Franco of California, 25 years old, Staff Sergeant Jose Duenes Jr. of Illinois, 25 years old, and Staff Sergeant Troy Knutson Collins of Michigan, 28 years old.
Oh, what a good time we will have.
We can never predict the future, but it does seem possible this week will go down as a kind of turning point in the Trump-Musk presidency and in American politics. Remember, just a few days ago, started off with New Jersey Senator Cory Booker speaking on the Senate floor for a record 25 hours, calling on Americans to meet this moral moment. Then we saw the absolute rejection, indeed, you might even see humiliation of Elon Musk and his $25 million in the form of a double-digit win in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race on Tuesday, followed by Donald Trump announcing truly nonsensical, damaging global tariffs on Wednesday. Since then, the stock market has been plummeting in response. Tomorrow, to end the week, a mass protest is planned in over 1,200 locations across the country, with over 500,000 people signing up to resist what is happening as part of the Hands Off 2025 protests. Josh Marshall is founder and editor-in-chief of Talking Points Memo. He's been closely reporting on Trump and Musk's dismantling of the government. He joins me now. You know, there's a temptation sometimes, Josh, I think in this era, partly because Trump has acted so egregiously and malevolently and nothing seemed to sort of permanently do him in politically, to think that nothing matters. But I just got to think what's happened this week matters. Maybe I'm wrong, but what do you think?
Oh, I think it does. I mean, you know, everything that is happening in this struggle that has been going on for the last couple months is about public opinion, and people notice these things, right? I mean, you know, one thing I thought a lot about back to the first Trump presidency is that until COVID hit, there was definitely a way, and a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals didn't really appreciate this, that if you just turned off the TV and didn't pay attention to politics and the news, you could sort of feel like it didn't matter.
Totally.
You know, he said some stupid things, but it kind of didn't matter. It didn't materially affect your lives. And this time has been different. And certainly the last 2 days have been different. Everybody notices what's happening. So things do break through. Sometimes they don't always quickly. But as you said, you don't have to be a news obsessive to notice what happened this week. You don't. This has hit everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And one thing to keep in mind here with these tariffs is the markets are reacting first because they're pricing out the future. They're still, you know, the car companies still have stock that they're going to sell before these kick in. There's a lot of this sort of lag in the system. So we're not even yet dealing with, oh shoot, that car costs $5,000 more, or coffee is now more expensive, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of the way that tariffs work is not linear, right? I mean, there's okay, sure, the coffee goes up X%, but then they start, you know, kind of rerouting exports in one direction, and sometimes there is no coffee, or you know, there are things, you know, one of the things, and this is something I think we see with Trump, he is still thinking in terms of, well, there's cars made in America and cars made in Europe and cars made in Mexico, but no cars actually function that way anymore. You know, in one of the products of NAFTA going back 30 years now is that cars are kind of traded back and forth across the border half a dozen times before they're cars, right? So tariffs work in this kind of cumulative and nonlinear way, and very unpredictable ways, and we're going to see that now.
One of the sort of features of this week as well is this sort of assault on the constitutional order. You're seeing it in a few places. You wrote about this today, but one is just to me the flatly illegal way in which the tariffs are done. Like, I just think he doesn't have the statutory authority under the 1970s law they're citing to unilaterally impose a $6 trillion tax hike. And the Congress has the power to halt Trump's tariffs, but Republicans aren't ready to use it, is sort of the headline from the AP. But like, the unilateralism here, this is one of these places where the unilateralism as process and the negative effects tangibly are together as the same part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, one of the things we have seen in a lot of the stuff Doge is doing, you can't, it is against the law, against the Constitution, to go in and just start dismantling the government. We hire presidents to run the government, not dismantle parts of it. But those things don't really impact a lot of people, at least in the short term. But as we were just saying, the tariffs do impact a lot of people. And as you say, it's sort of one of these funny things with this law that this is definitely not what he is allowed to do under the law. The law is specifically about national emergencies.
Yes.
That you give the president the flexibility to move quickly and stuff like this. And what he did here was declared a national emergency and then put in place these tariffs. Now, unfortunately, and this is something that at some future point when things become normal again, we're going to have to revisit some of these laws.
Yep.
Because it says he can only do this during a national emergency, and who decides whether there's a national emergency? The president.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's against the law, but Congress put him in charge of, deciding what's legal, basically. Yeah.
Final question for you on the sort of constitutional order, the frontiers of it. The sort of most dystopian aspect, I think, in the first 2 months would be the rendering of people on the thinnest of pretenses, often plainly incorrectly, to this foreign gulag that they're never heard from again. And one of those men, a father from Maryland who'd been in the country for a while, he had legal protected status, essentially. The government said you can't deport him. He was sent anyway. The Trump administration admitted it was an error. There's a federal judge tonight saying you have to bring him back. And the White House saying, we suggest the judge contact President Bukele because we are unaware of the judge having jurisdiction or authority over the country of El Salvador. This seems like the big showdown.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much intentionally dystopian aspects of this, right? We just sent him to be in prison for what? Who knows? In this literally foreign gulag, and the White House is kind of saying, oh, he's in another country. What do you want us to do?
Too late.
Yeah, too late. But this is one of those cases where at least usually a judge will listen to what the government says and assume it is broadly accurate. But, clearly that's not the case. They can get him back. And you're right. This is the moment of confrontation where we find out whether they're going to follow the law.
Yep. Josh Marshall, thank you very much. Have a great weekend, my friend. That is all in for this week. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. You were under the weather. Are you feeling better?
I am feeling better. Really knocked me out, but I'm back.
Well, I was worried because I knew that it really knocked you for one, and so I was very happy that you were able to come back today, and I hope you have a restful weekend.
Thank you. I got a call at 8 o'clock and 45 seconds from my parents. You okay? What's the matter?
I'm busy. Yes, Mom.
I'm sick.
Thanks. Thank you, Chris. And thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. All right, so first green shoots of spring. Sun finally pushing its way through the clouds. It was a beautiful, sunny, even warm day in Manhattan, which is part of why the ski masks were so surprising. I'm going to say a word here that I don't usually say, let alone on TV, and that's because it's the name of the group, so do not hold it against me. But this is the Russian punk band and protest group Pussy Riot in New York City this week.
We are members of Pussy Riot, Russian protest group. We've been imprisoned in Russia. We've been persecuted. We are in federal wanted list in our country. We're members of Pussy Riot, a Russian protest group. We've been imprisoned in Russia. We've been persecuted.
We're on the federal wanted list in our country. Pussy Riot are a punk band and a protest group that have been jailed in Russia and beaten up and hounded all over the globe now by Russian President Vladimir Putin. They have been chased out of that country. As such, they remain one of the last remaining visible, uncompromising, and alive elements of the Russian resistance to Putin. Putin, of course, has managed to just kill off so many others who dared to oppose him. But this week, members of that Russian group came to America, to New York City, to scream at us, to literally scream at us in an encouraging way, trying to tell us to act now before what has happened to them in their country happens to us here in ours.
Wake up, America! Wake up, America! Wake up, America! Wake up, America!
Wake up, America. You can see the signs they're holding there, including this one on the left here that says nothing special. One member of the group, Masha Alyokina, explained, I think, what they mean by that nothing special sign.
I don't think that there is something special with Russia or Russian people. A totalitarian state can appear anywhere if people are silent.
I don't think there's something special with Russia or Russian people. A totalitarian state can appear anywhere if people are silent. And so that's why they came here. They're persecuted and they've been imprisoned and they are now hunted by their own country, a dictatorship where it is illegal to use the word war to describe a war, where it is illegal for even one person to hold a protest alone or to hold up a protest sign even if it has no words on it. But here they are in our country trying to sound an alarm to tell us to move fast because your country doesn't come back when you lose it to a dictatorship. You see the big sign they were holding there, the one that said freedom of speech, and this other one, which kind of stuck with me, don't give up. It's kind of an unsettling thing. After everything they have been through, they're trying to encourage us.
We are here now because we see the rise of authoritarianism here, and we want to call people to not be silent, and we want people to remember to not give up, even in the difficult conditions, to have a hope inside, to have belief.
Don't give up, even in the difficult conditions. Have a hope inside, have belief. It's really jarring, right, to hear that from Russian dissidents, that they're the ones encouraging us. This is, like I said, it's unsettling to see it. But I also feel like, you know what? The American people right now understand the assignment. Like, I feel like right now we are so far from giving up. We are whatever the opposite is of giving up. I mean, we are expecting a massive day of protest tomorrow in this country. I want to show you this from TikTok. This is the sort of hype video for the protests tomorrow that has been circulating online, particularly on TikTok. And it's funny because you'll see here, it's the kind of hook line here is that it's literally about we're done watching the news, we're stopping watching the news, we're going out tomorrow to protest instead. I recognize it's a little ironic for for me to be showing you this on the news, but still, I have no ego about these things, and I think you should see it. Watch. One movement, every state protesting dictators. That is from the 50-51 movement, which started these protests against what Trump was doing very early on in the second Trump term. Remember, 50-51 comes from them organizing 50 protests in 50 state capitals all on one day. That's what 50-51 stands for. But it's them and Indivisible and basically everybody else jumping in together tomorrow in support of these protests. Tomorrow is expected to be the largest day of protests that the country has yet seen since Trump has been back in office. And it looks like it's going to be a really big day. If the number of protests planned actually does happen, and the number of people who have said they're going to show up, then we are easily looking at hundreds of thousands of Americans who are going to be taking part in nonviolent anti-Trump protests tomorrow. More than 1,200 separate protests are planned tomorrow in all 50 states. We're expecting a large gathering in Washington, D.C., but I think maybe every state capital is also going to have a protest, different federal buildings in multiple states, congressional offices, post offices, city centers. Again, we won't know exactly the scale of the protests or their exact character until they happen. We know the White House has canceled all the garden tours they had planned for tomorrow at the White House. They've moved them from tomorrow, Saturday, to Sunday instead because they are expecting large anti-Trump crowds in Washington. So the garden tours are moved, you guys. All week long, people have been sending us here at the Rachel Maddow Show images of their preparations for tomorrow, like these pictures that we got from a group of ladies. They're just a friend group in New Jersey. They say their average group, the average age in their group is 90. But they've been making their signs, getting ready for tomorrow. Hands off Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Also, dump Trump. You see the one on the sign on the table there in the back? See his little legs sticking out of the trash can? Any chance anybody here was an art teacher? Even before tomorrow's protests, which again, we're expecting to be widespread and large, we've seen a lot of protests just in the past few days. We had students protesting yesterday at Columbia University, protesting against Trump arresting and imprisoning student leader Mahmoud Khalil. We had students protesting yesterday in Tempe, Arizona, after Arizona State said it learned that 8 students on their campus have also had their student visas mysteriously revoked by Trump. We had students yesterday protesting at the UC Berkeley campus against Trump shutting down the U.S. Department of Education. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, Maddow, dog bites man. Wow, a protest at Berkeley. What a surprise. But you know what? It really is everywhere if you look for it. Let me show you. I mean, there's Berkeley, yes, but Donald Trump Jr., he spoke at an event in Birmingham, Alabama last night. And the protests were there, too, in deep red Alabama.
You're not welcome here with your money and your greed and your hypocrisy, and we're here to let you know that you're not welcome here.
This is the message protesters want Donald Trump Jr. to hear while he's in Birmingham.
No justice, no peace.
Chanting at and displaying signs for people entering the BJCC to attend the Alabama GOP victory dinner where Donald Trump Jr. attended and spoke.
Again, these aren't part of the big protests that are planned for everywhere tomorrow. This is just what it looks like on a Thursday in Alabama these days. I mean, this was Alabama. On any given day in America now, you might have a very confrontational protest like this one last night in Salinas, California, where someone decided to hold an event celebrating January 6th convicts, including, reportedly, some who were convicted of assaulting police officers. According to local news, multiple venues in Salinas, California told this group no, but one neighborhood venue did agree to host the event. Thereafter, all the neighbors came out to show them what they thought of a commemorative January 6th event. It was, to say the least, not a friendly welcome. But you know, at the same time, here also was Buffalo, New York. Americans turning out with Canadian flags and "We Love Canada" signs, protesting against Trump's various attacks and threats against Canada and the tariffs against Canada. Basically, the American people trying to tell the Canadian people that, hey, it's not us. It's not us. It's this guy, this president, but we do not agree with him. And we do not want the kind of divide between our country that he insists on. Today, this was the federal courthouse in Greenbelt, Maryland. People showing up while a federal court hearing was underway on the case of a Maryland father who the Trump administration admitted this week. They accidentally sent him to a prison in El Salvador, even though they didn't mean to send him there. This man is now being held in El Salvador in that prison indefinitely. And the Trump administration is trying to tell the courts that even though they admit it was a mistake to send him there, they have no intention of getting him back or even trying to get him out of that prison. In the face of that absurdity, these Maryland residents today turned up at the courthouse to support him and his family while the hearing was underway. You see the signs: bring Kilmar Garcia home, free our neighbor Kilmar Garcia, kids need their dads. And this one, which is right to the point, all this is sick. At the conclusion of that court hearing today, the judge hearing the case ordered the Trump administration that they must retrieve that man. They must get him out of that prison in El Salvador and bring him back to the United States by 11:59 p.m. on Monday night. Go do it. Today, of course, you saw what happened in the markets. The Dow dropped more than 2,000 points today. Not a typo. Dow plunges 2,200 points. Yesterday and today are the first time ever that the Dow has dropped 1,500 points or more on 2 consecutive days. 1,600 points yesterday, 2,200 points today. The S&P 500 dropped 10% in 2 days. It dropped 6% today alone. Just for context, whether or not you watch the markets, whether or not you have any money in the markets or a retirement account or whatever, just to get a sense of the scale here, I'll give you 2 metrics here to get a sense of the scale. The first one is the circuit breakers. Do you know about this? The markets have circuit breakers that kick in when things go off a cliff. That's a mixed metaphor, but I think you know what I mean. They call them trading curbs, and they're these shutoffs that kick in automatically and basically stop the market. They stop people from trading for 15 minutes when things have gone unbelievably wrong. And where those circuit breakers kick in, like the threshold of how bad it has to be before the circuit breakers kick in, is when the S&P drops 7% from the previous day's close. Today, the S&P dropped 6%. Had we got to 7, we would have hit the circuit breaker. They would have turned the lights out on the market to try to save us from ourselves. That's one way to understand the severity of what's happened here. And here's another. Look at this. This is the VIX index, VIX. Unlike the stock market graphs where you can tell things are bad when they go down, with the VIX, it's the volatility index. It goes up when things are terrible. It's like the economic crisis meter. And you can see there are just a few big peaks there over time. The first huge peak, that's 2008. That was the global financial disaster of 2008, the worst financial catastrophe since the Great Depression. That's the first big peak. The next big peak is March 2020. That's the equally huge global disaster, right? When the COVID pandemic overran the world, killed millions of people, and basically shut off economic activity like there had been a power outage. So those are the first 2 big peaks there. But now look, new peak. That's now. That's now. That one not caused by the biggest financial catastrophe since the Great Depression or a global pandemic that's killing millions of people. That one caused simply by Donald Trump being president. Again, with his great ideas. And the scale of what he's doing, the scale of the destruction that he has wrought, is a little bit hard to get your head around. I mean, like, you can see the headline writers scrambling to try to find the right words tonight. I mean, here's the Wall Street Journal front page right now. U.S. stocks plunge deeper, capping worst week since 2020, which again was the pandemic. Trump's tariffs set off 2-day sell-off as recessionary fears mount. More than $6 trillion erased from market. This has been the lead analysis piece on CNBC.com all day. Trump's tariffs are biggest policy mistake in 95 years. This is the lead editorial today at the Financial Times. America's astonishing act of self-harm. I thought the picture of Trump there actually kind of puts a nice punctuation mark on that. Look what we've done to ourselves. Hi. But this is the lead, quote, if it endures Donald Trump's decision on April 2nd, 2025, to enact sweeping tariffs on U.S. trade partners, will go down as one of the greatest acts of self-harm in American economic history. His actions will wreak untold damage on households, businesses, and financial markets across the world, upending a global economic order that America benefited from and helped to create. Elsewhere in the FT today, they described Trump's actions as, quote, strangely self-sabotaging. quote, economic lunacy that might seem better explained by psychologists than economists. Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary, says, quote, this is to economics what creationism is to biology, what astrology is to astronomy, what RFK thought is to vaccine science. The Wall Street Journal summarizes tonight, quote, the Dow Jones Industrial Average became the last of the 3 major financial indices to enter a correction, defined as a decline of 10% or more from a closing peak. After today, the Dow is down 14.9% from its most recent high. The NASDAQ is now a bear market, off 22.7% from its recent high. Anything more than 20% is considered a bear market. The Magnificent 7 stocks, which include NVIDIA, Apple, and Amazon, collectively lost $1.55 trillion in market capitalization this week. That is a record. Apple alone saw $443.5 billion in market value evaporate. I mean, it is hard to get your head around how much damage this one man can cause. I think it's even harder to get your head around simultaneously the fact that he can do damage of this magnitude with such a teeny tiny amount of thought. Right? You'd think it would take like a grand plan and some big brains to figure out how to destroy the economy of the richest nation on earth. But that's not how it's working out. Turns out it doesn't take a big idea or a lot of big brains working together. I know that this may be something that you remember, but just in case it's not, I'm just going to put this back on the front page here just for a second. Because do you remember where Trump got the tariff thing from in the first place? Do you remember like when and why and how we started talking about tariffs in the first place? It was in his first campaign for president. Trump didn't really have any formal economic advisors. So he told his son-in-law, Jared, to find him an economic advisor. Trump reportedly gave Jared some vague ideas of what his thoughts were on economic issues. You know, something, make me look tough, China bad, something. Jared then decided to find his father-in-law a financial advisor for his presidential campaign by going on the Amazon.com website and starting to browse books. Not like reading the books, because you can't do that on the Amazon website. He was just looking at the covers, looking at the titles. And he found a book title that he thought was so cool. The title was Death by China. Oh my God, that's so cool. That's so awesome. And that apparently was it. Quote from Vanity Fair. Trump gave Jared a summary of his views and then asked him to do some research. Kushner simply went on Amazon, where he was struck by the title of one book, Death by China, co-authored by a man named Peter Navarro. Jared then cold called Navarro, a well-known trade deficit hawk who agreed to join the team as an economic advisor. Navarro was a major advocate for an aggressive pro-tariff policy. Where did Peter Navarro get his idea that tariffs would be a good policy for America? What was his backup for that conviction? Well, he did have backup from a real expert who he cited in at least a half dozen of his books, including the one that Jared found on Amazon that fateful day. In all of his books, Peter Navarro has cited an economics expert to justify his views. And the economics expert he cites is somebody named Ron Vera, V-A-R-A, Ron Vera. When Trump won the presidency and entered the White House, this Ron Vera started circulating a memo around Washington in support of Trump using tariffs in trade policy. According to the New York Times, the memo had been, quote, sent from an email address purportedly belonging to Ron Vera. At one point, Ron Vera wrote in the memo that Trump could, quote, ride the tariffs to victory. The problem is Ron Vera doesn't exist. He never has. The economics expert that Peter Navarro has long cited to explain why he's so gung-ho on tariffs, this person, Ron Vera, is a made-up person. He is a fictional person. Peter Navarro invented Ron Vera as his expert source so he could quote this expert source over and over and over again in his crackpot books. Who is Ron Vera? Ron Vera is an anagram of Navarro, which is his last name. I mean, my name anagrams to Macho Waddler, but I don't see myself trying to talk you into doing what Macho Waddler wants, right? But that really is how the Trump administration crafted its tariff policy. That's where Trump came up with the tariff idea. Circulating a fake memo from a fake person with a fake email address in order to make it look like this was a serious issue being debated by real experts. That is the intellectual basis on which Donald Trump today wiped $6 trillion of wealth out of existence and crashed America's markets and brought America and the world to the brink of a self-inflicted, on-purpose, global Great Depression along the lines of what we had in 2008 and what the pandemic inflicted upon us in 2020. This time, the global disaster is Donald Trump's big brain. And Donald Trump may think it's all going to work out. The American people are awake and well aware that this is not going to work out. New Reuters Ipsos polling, to which I would like to bring your attention. Do you approve or disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of his job as president? Disapprove by a 10-point margin. Do you approve or disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling the economy specifically? Disapprove by a 15-point margin. Do you approve or disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling the issue of international trade? Disapprove by an 18-point margin. Do you approve or disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling the issue of your cost of living? Disapprove by a 27-point margin. Is the Trump administration competent or incompetent at running the federal government? Incompetent by a 20-point margin. Is the Trump administration competent or incompetent at rolling out new economic policies? Incompetent by a 25-point margin. Is the Trump administration competent or incompetent at downsizing government without affecting vital services? Incompetent by a 25-point margin. That's before the markets did what they've done in the last 2 days. The American people get it. They get it. They are awake. They are not giving up. And tomorrow, a lot of them are going to show it. Senator Mark Kelly is here tonight. Ezra Levin from Indivisible is here tonight. Stay with us.
The stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? I think, the kids are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and it's going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, kids are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and they're going very well. It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom.
That it is heartbreak hotel for Elon Musk, that Trump is already set the soil to break up with him. Trump takes off for Mar-a-Lago to hang out with his rich Saudi golf friends, and Musk is somewhere in some hole on Twitter boosting lies. Put up this tweet. We've got Alex Jones, who is a complete nut job liar of the highest order, trying to say that there is overwhelming evidence that the Wisconsin Supreme Court race was stolen. Elon Musk retweets it and puts, And I want to point out that this is who the MAGA men have to hang out with and who they have to boost, because for them, facts are painful. So they have to default back to propaganda because facts are the kryptonite to this jet stream of bullshit in which MAGA operates. Now,
The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium has announced the sudden passing of one of its most beloved residents, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. On March 25, 2025, the 33-year-old silverback died from a sudden cardiac event. Despite immediate medical efforts, he couldn't be revived. Now, gorillas, just like humans, are highly susceptible to heart disease. Harry had been receiving treatment for a cardiac condition since 2022 with guidance from the Great Ape Heart Project. But sadly, his time came sooner than anyone expected. Harry wasn't just any gorilla. Born at the Cincinnati Zoo on June 14, 1991, he moved to Pittsburgh a year later and quickly became a favorite. Over 3 decades, he grew into a gentle but strong leader. After the passing of Mrithi in 2024, Harry stepped up as the troop's protector, becoming a father figure to the little ones. The zoo's curator of mammals, Kelsey Forbes, described him as amazing with all of the gorilla kids, and said he had the best laugh of them all. If you ever met Harry, you'll remember his fiery red hair and playful personality. He loved keeping visitors on their toes, sometimes even giving them a friendly scare. But behind his playful antics was a sobering truth. Western lowland gorillas like Harry are critically endangered, facing habitat loss and poaching in the wild. His passing reminds us how precious these animals truly are. Harry will be deeply missed by the zoo staff, visitors, and all who knew him. If you have a favorite memory of him, the Pittsburgh Zoo is inviting everyone to share stories on their social media pages. The Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium remains committed to the conservation of western lowland gorillas and will continue to provide exceptional care for its remaining troop members. Rest in peace, Harry. You were truly one of a kind.
From the Pittsburgh Zoo, they announced the death of a longtime family member, Harry, the western lowland gorilla. The 33-year-old gorilla died of a sudden cardiac event yesterday. The zoo says he was loved by staff and visitors since he came to Pittsburgh all the way back in 1992.
Southern Lebanon. The IDF says Hassan Farhat orchestrated several terror attacks against Israeli civilians and IDF troops. This as IDF ground troops begin operations in northern Gaza to expand what they call the security zone. The IDF says the troop activity will help eliminate, quote, numerous terrorists and dismantle Hamas infrastructure. Meanwhile, Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says the IDF bombed a school in Gaza City, killing at least 27 people and injuring 70. The IDF says it was a Hamas command center. Let's bring in ABC's Marcus Moore in London. Marcus, how does this strike in Lebanon affect the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel?
Well, right now, it does not seem to have had a specific impact on the ceasefire, but the potential is there. And if you consider that Israel has already been carrying out a number of strikes in Lebanon, mostly in southern Lebanon, even with this ceasefire that was agreed to back in November. The most recent strike that took out a top Hamas official, Hamas confirmed that one of their commanders was killed in that Israeli airstrike in Sidon, that's in southern Lebanon. And this strike was, Diane, carried out on an apartment building there. And Hassan Farhat, or also known as Abu Yasser, was killed along with his daughter and son, according to a Hamas statement. Now, Israel has accused Farhat, quote, of orchestrating numerous terror attacks against Israeli civilians and IDF troops. They said that he was also responsible for the rockets launched towards Safed on February 14th of last year that killed several soldiers. And so that's what we've learned about that particular strike, Diane, and the strikes do continue not only in southern Lebanon, but also in Gaza.
Marcus, the IDF says its ground troops are allowing civilians in Gaza to evacuate as they conduct operations there today. What more can you tell us about these troop movements and where the civilians are going?
Well, first of all, in terms of where civilians are going, there's not a lot of safe places for them to go at this point, and that's been an ongoing issue with this war in Gaza. But we're learning that in the process of the IDF expanding their military presence in Gaza, they're operating in new areas between Rafah and Khan Yunis in the south. The IDF says it's trying to separate Hamas fighters in Rafah from Khan Yunis. That's part of their strategy there. And they say with the overall goal to prevent any future attacks on Israel and to protect Israel or Israeli citizens from any further attacks. And so that's why they say we're seeing what we're seeing in Gaza at the moment.
Marcus, it's been more than a month since Israel has allowed aid into Gaza. Any movement on that front?
At this point, the aid organizations are still sounding the alarm on this, Diane. As you know, March 2nd was the last time aid was allowed into Gaza. And what we've heard from organizations and officials there is that, for example, the World Food Program, they say that they've been able to continue with hot meals for families there, but that those supplies are likely to run out in 2 weeks, Diane. Also, there are a number of bakeries that have shut down. 25 of them, the World Food Program says, have been shut down because they don't have fuel or flour. And so that reinforces the voices who are urging for there to be some type of ceasefire, Diane, at the very least, to allow critical aid, food and aid to get into Gaza for those families who are caught in the middle.
All right, Marcus Moore, thank you.
The U.S. government is trying to ban this drone. Here's why. My friends
ordering people to head to shelters in the west of Gaza City, which is already overwhelmed with hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians who took refuge after they got threatened by the Israeli occupation forces, like the areas of Beit Lahia, Jabal refugee camp. And now these people have no place to go to after the brutal months of the Israeli war. Worth mentioning is that these people have been displaced at the early beginning of the war to the south of Gaza City. They returned to the north in Shija'iyya to find their homes completely and partially destroyed. They set up tents and lived in the neighborhood, but after the new forced evacuation order, this is the scene in the Shija'iyya neighborhood.
For over 15 days, we've endured artillery shelling, but it's now more intense than ever. They were firing non-stop. The walls collapsed on us, our families, friends and neighbors. Some were killed, others managed to escape with their lives. Our biggest struggle now is displacement. I rented a cot, but now we have no idea how to handle this situation. I'm heading west of Gaza City, looking for any street where I can set up a tent.
Amid the ongoing Israeli closure of the border and the blockade on humanitarian aid, the situation is getting much more dire as the starvation is imminent, and these people are going nowhere without basic necessities, food, water, or any medical care these people can get access to.
The situation in Gaza is unbearable. People have no flour, there's hunger, humiliation, and conditions are getting worse. We are being forced to leave and we don't even know where to go. The Israeli army keeps issuing evacuation orders, pushing us from place to place. We are exhausted and completely broken. I left my home with nothing. This is all I could carry.
This is the situation from inside Al-Shija'iyya neighborhood east of Gaza City.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
1988. Throughout Germany and Austria, thousands of Jewish people are startled awake by the sound of breaking glass and roaring flames. Synagogues set aflame, businesses and homes pillaged. 91 people die, 30,000 people sent to the camps, 7,000 businesses destroyed, 900 synagogues burned to the ground. According to PBS, a report back to the US State Department from an American official in Leipzig said of the event, having demolished dwellings and held most of the movable effects of the streets, the insatiably sadistic...
Like one real rough, nasty day, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. He's Hitler! and then they say, he's a Nazi. I'm not a Nazi. I'm the opposite of a Nazi. Of them, it's just this amorphous group of people. But they're smart and they're vicious. And we have to defeat them. And when I say the enemy from within, the other side goes crazy.
Papers belong to the family of Mark Abrams, a social scientist who worked with BBC's Overseas Propaganda Analysis Unit and the Psychological Warfare Branch during World War II. Written just as the war was starting to turn against Hitler, it shows that British analysts had noticed signs of developing paranoia in his speechmaking and, chillingly, a growing preoccupation with what he called the Jewish poison. At the time that it was written, the tide had started to turn against Germany, Anthony said. In response, Hitler began to turn his attentions to the German home front. This document, however, is there, and the smears work in the same way. People who are already primed to hate the target of the smear will use it to justify and intensify their pre-existing disgust, and will push them from irritation and harm. In response, Hitler began to turn his attentions to the German home front. This document shows that British intelligence sensed this happening. McCarthy recognized that, faced with external failure, the Nazi leader was focusing on a perceived enemy within instead, namely the Jews. Given that we now know the fight was commencing, this makes for poignant reading. And you don't have to go much further from there to connect the horrors of the Third Reich to the promises and the lies of the Trump campaign. The lies he repeated during the presidential debate about Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs, painting them as monsters, was compared by multiple outlets to the blood libel, the age-old conspiracy theory that Jewish people used the blood of Christian children to make matzah, the textbook anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and on its face, a ludicrous smear. So too are these lies about Haitians. Although I don't quite feel comfortable drawing a direct line here for reasons of, well, history, and also because animals and babies, they're two different things. The spirit, however, is there, and the smears work in the same way. People who are already primed to hate the target of the smear will use it to justify and intensify their pre-existing disgust, and will push them from irritation and harsh words closer to outright violence. Those who recognize it rightly as a falsehood dismiss it as ridiculous, because it is. But it is important that we recognize that it is as dangerous as it is false. This is an important tool in radicalizing the people that Trump needs to get his violent work done.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You don't need to be a historian to see the obvious connections between accusing Jews of eating children and Haitians of eating pets. And since the Haitian Revolution, Americans have often treated Haitians as the embodiment of the terrifying racial other, in the same way that Europeans displaced their fears and resentments onto Jews. Marianne Williamson helpfully made the subtext the text in a tweet saying that Democrats dismiss
cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
You don't need to be a historian to see the obvious connections between accusing Jews of eating children and Haitians of eating pets. And since
in nearly a decade, Putin is calling up 160,000 more Russian citizens to his military. That is the largest conscription in Russia in at least 8 years. And the numbers are really incredible. We just went back and looked at this. Get ready for this. Putin's army has grown from 1 million to 1.5 million people in his military. 1 to 1.5 million. So right now, Putin's army is 50% bigger than the night before he invaded Ukraine. He's added 500,000 more people into his military. This is stunning when you consider how many people are dying a month on his front line. And despite this massive increase, right, largest conscription in 8 years, a military 50% bigger than before the war, Trump is taking Putin at his word still that he wants the war to end, which may be part of why Russian TV is now mocking Trump.
We were a great country before America was even discovered as a continent. Not to mention, before America became a nation. Could we imagine, as the New York Times admits, that we would fight America in a war and win? Now we're doing it every day.
Dan Rice is out front now. He is the former special advisor to the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. Also, of course, himself spent time in Iraq and now a lot here in Ukraine. Dan, I want to ask you about Putin's draft because the numbers are just so stunning. First, though, I want to begin with something that happened here just in these past hours. A strike in Ukraine this weekend, attacks in restaurants in the city of Dnipro. We're showing images of it now. You were actually there, physically there, and you say it was your closest call that you've had in years. at this point in the war? What happened?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Aaron. And yeah, it's incredible that every night the Russian terrorists continue to terrorize Ukraine all across the country. I was in Dnipro, which is a beautiful city down south from Kyiv and close to the front lines. And we were attacked by Russian Shaheeds. Those are the Iranian-supplied drones that attacked the city and hit all civilian targets. Like, it's ridiculous. These are just terrorists. The Russians hit the several restaurants and a military hospital they were targeting, and it was a pretty massive attack. We were very close.
And this is as there's some sort of a whatever, I don't know how many quotes you can put around the words ceasefire, but this is what's going on just here in these past hours. And in that context, Dan, let me ask you about what we are learning today, that Putin is ordering 160,000 more troops to come into his military. That's an increase from last year in his conscription, and that his military overall is 500,000 more people now than it was in February of 2022 before he invaded Ukraine itself. So what is the state of the Russian military right now?
Yeah, it's incredible, Aaron. I mean, this is Putin is accelerating the buildup of men, arms, munitions, and is on a war footing. 40% of the GDP of Russia is now going to weapons. It's not going to stop just at Ukraine. I mean, there's a very serious concern that it will continue on to other countries: Moldova, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. That's why they are all arming. That's why they are. This is a very serious situation. Russia is losing.
Can you give us an update on how that's going?
We do. We have an envoy from Russia. We're talking about it. We'd like to see that stop as soon as possible, because thousands of people are being killed a week. Soldiers, mostly soldiers, and Ukrainian soldiers and Russian soldiers. And you're losing 2,000, 3,000 sometimes a week. So we're spearheading the drive to get it done. Europe has not been successful in dealing with President Putin, but I think I will be successful.
Yeah, hey, Betsy.
On the topic of deportation flights, were you informed of Judge Boasberg's March 15th verbal order to turn planes around, and were you involved in the decision to defy that order?
I don't think anyone defied an order by a judge. That's pending in court right now. I think our attorneys have argued in court. I think there were arguments yesterday. We're awaiting a ruling. I anticipate this will go to the Supreme Court, be ruled in our favor. I don't believe anyone defied a court order. I think testimony came out in court that those planes not only had taken off, but were outside of American airspace. Moreover, they were illegal aliens from El Salvador, just like these guys on this chart, who are committing violent murders throughout our country. They were
additional tariffs targeting the United States, and this is a response to the global tariffs. President Donald Trump announced that on Wednesday, and Beijing is now saying it will impose tariffs of 34% on all U.S. goods. So that's some breaking news there, and that the measures will come into effect on April 10. It's in less.
Tonight, we begin a series of reports from Taiwan. The leader of the self-governing democracy of more than 23 million people argues the island is already sovereign and independent, but Beijing calls it a renegade province and vows to one day unite it with the mainland, either peacefully or by force. Nick Schifrin recently traveled to Taiwan and joins us now. So, Nick, what did you find?
Jeff, Taiwan has long been the most tense flashpoint between Washington and Beijing. By law, the U.S. is required to help Taiwan defend its democracy, which also produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced computer chips. This week, China's People's Liberation Army launched new drills and sent ships that ringed around Taiwan. The U.S. said the moves, quote, put the region's security and the world's prosperity at risk.
So I think he's going to live up to what he told me, and I think he's going to fulfill his part of the deal. Now, then you have Zelensky, and hopefully he's going to live up. I see he's trying to renegotiate the rare earth. You know, we did something because, as you know, the Europeans get paid back the money that they gave, and we don't, because Biden is an incompetent president. And he should have asked for rare earth, or he should have asked for the loans to be guaranteed in some form. That's what Europe did. Europe is in for probably $100 billion, and we're in for $350 billion. So we're in for more than 3 times. And now you could make it a little bit less than that, but it doesn't matter. Whatever the number, we're in for substantially more than Europe. We could be in for $350 billion. They have no.
Catalina Marceau-Dabru is here in studio. Catalina, you're taking us back to our top story this evening. We'll be fact-checking Donald Trump's latest claims about the war in Ukraine. Tell us more.
That's right, Sharon. Let's begin with these statements made by President Donald Trump today, who gave remarks on Ukraine at his Mar-a-Lago residence. We hear him saying that the U.S. gave Ukraine $350 billion.
I believe $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that, but it's
so as he says, a bit less than that, perhaps. He continues to say that Europe has given a very much smaller percentage in aid, about $100 billion compared to the $300 billion so that was given from the U.S. President Donald Trump has continued to insist on this number, even in writing, even some hours ago on his Truth Social and on X, where he continues to say that President Zelensky talked the U.S. into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. So it's actually a lot less than $350 billion. There are many numbers swirling around regarding the exact number of U.S. contributions to Ukraine. We'll be using the numbers published by the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. They have their own Ukraine support tracker that shows that the U.S. actually allocated about 114.2 billion euros or $119 billion, give or take, but not $350 billion per Donald Trump's claims. This graph also helps us debunk vis-a-vis his comments regarding Europe, where he says that the U.S. gives more aid to Ukraine than Europe. You can see that according to the same study, Europe has allocated about 132.3 billion euros or $137 billion in help for Ukraine, ahead of the 114 billion euros from the U.S.
In February 2024, Russia began its invasion of Crimea, a part of Ukraine. Little green men arrived suddenly in masks and unmarked uniforms, but everyone knew them to be Russians, acting on the orders of the Kremlin, despite the Kremlin's rather pathetic denials. I traveled to Ukraine shortly afterward, joined by my colleagues in Congress from both parties. We were there to speak with our friends in Kyiv and to pledge our support for our ally, to reinforce in our own way our commitment to NATO's eastern flank and to uphold our obligations under the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. That memorandum assured Ukraine's territorial integrity if Ukraine gave up the nuclear weapons it acquired when it was part of the Soviet Union. At the time, Ukraine had the 3rd largest nuclear stockpile in the world. Not only was the U.S. a signatory to that assurance, along with the UK, but so was the Kremlin. Well, Ukraine did give up its nuclear weapons in 1994. And sadly, Russia violated the terms of that agreement with ferocity. When people like Steve Witkoff say they believe Russian leaders live up to their word, they are dangerously ignorant of history. In 2022, Russia launched an even more massive invasion of Ukraine. And just a month later, I returned to that country alongside Speaker Pelosi for the first congressional visit to that country during the war. Now, I'm not here today to talk about Putin's aggression or this administration's shameful betrayal of Ukraine and capitulation to the Kremlin. I'm here to talk about the fact that before those trips, we received clear guidance. Assume everything you say will be overheard by the Kremlin. Everything you type on a phone may as well be a direct message to the Kremlin dictator. Certainly do not message anything sensitive. Just don't do it. The danger of Russian hacking and spying is high enough abroad. Just imagine how aggressive they are in a country they're actively invading. But that caution, that instruction was not limited to our visits to Ukraine. As the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, I found myself traveling around the world to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, to Pakistan and Yemen, and more. Numerous secret trips over a decade, and every time, the same message. Assume everything you do on your phone, personal device or burner phone, it doesn't matter, will be snooped and scooped up by any adversary who cares to do so. And let me tell you, they care to do so. The same is true here at home. Handling classified information, we took every precaution. Practically that meant we spent a lot of time underground, quite literally, inside a windowless, secure, compartmented information facility or SCIF in the basement of the Capitol. An actual bunker. No phones allowed, no recording devices of any kind, not even a Fitbit. We understood, hey, this wasn't going to be convenient. It wasn't designed to be convenient. It was designed to be secure. And we all knew then, as we all know today, that preserving the classified nature of our nation's secrets is of the utmost importance, which brings us to today, where we have witnessed the top officials in this administration discussing classified military operations, military strike plans, war plans in the open on Signal, a commercial app like WhatsApp. The administration's top officials created an unsecured group chat and shared information before the start of a military operation that could have put the pilots flying these missions directly in harm's way. And now it appears this was not a one-off, because of course it wasn't a one-off. We're now hearing that there were 20 or more chats involving top officials discussing sensitive information, where the administration seems to have shared national secrets like they were discussing, well, I don't know, March Madness, texting them recklessly. And it appears that the only reason we know about these chats is because they accidentally added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic into one of them, while he was apparently sitting in his car in the parking lot at a Safeway grocery store. It would be funny if it wasn't so damn dangerous to our national security. Put aside the amateurism of debating and deliberating over our national security operations using emojis and whatever else they used on this chat. From a counterintelligence perspective, this was the effective equivalent of shouting our national security secrets on the busy streets of Beijing, or leaving folders of information in cafes near the Kremlin. It's a national security screw-up of epic proportions. As former chair of the House Intelligence Committee, I have heard after-action reports of what happens when an intelligence failure occurs, when a source or an asset is compromised, when an enemy penetrates our networks, or gets a source that can provide a glimpse into our secrets. Because when an intelligence failure happens, it can be catastrophic. Informants can be burned, lives can be ruined. In some cases, human sources can be tortured and murdered. Operations can be compromised, or soldiers put in harm's way without their knowledge. Our methods exposed and therefore adapted to. Future missions scuttled because the source, human or technical, has been burned, gone. In Syria, the Houthis are undoubtedly turning everything upside down to figure out how we knew where the target of this operation would be. Was there a human source who knew the location of the building, which was apparently, according to this chat, the girlfriend's residence? Or was there a technical source, like the target's phone or someone else's phone? What future missions will now not be possible because we don't know if our sources have been compromised? The loss of trust is also significant from our allies around the world that contribute intelligence to support operations like this one. Published reports indicate that Israel may have provided some of the information used in support of that attack on Houthi missile operatives, and that the Israelis are furious. For me, it brings back memories of other published reports of President Trump whooping it up with the Russian ambassador and foreign minister in the Oval Office, if you remember that saga, during Trump's first term, while reportedly discussing still other intelligence reportedly provided by Israel. The accidental inclusion of a reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, sitting in that Safeway parking lot, privy to that classified exchange of operational military planning, is a serious indictment of the arrogance and incompetence of this administration. The fact that information was shared with such reckless disregard on an unsecured, vulnerable network, apparently with regularity, is a scandal of historic proportions, and yet they refuse to accept any accountability. They engage in more whataboutism. They dodge every which way, deny, deflect blame, blame the journalist, blame the publication, blame the app, call it unimportant, call it a lie, call it a hack, say that someone's contact information was just sucked into their phone. The list goes on. The lies and obfuscation gets worse, and in the end, no accountability, no security, no nothing. Signalgate is the perfect microcosm of this administration's carelessness with our national secrets. But it doesn't start or end with Signal or using Gmail for sensitive national security matters. Just yesterday, we learned of another purge, this time at the National Security Council. If firing of inspector generals and ethics lawyers and career prosecutors wasn't enough, senior officials at the NSC just got shown the door. Among others, Lieutenant General Timothy Hawk, the well-respected director of the National Security Agency, the NSA, and commander of Cybercom, fired. Not because of incompetence, no. Not because he was responsible or involved in the Signal group, no. The folks in that Signal chat, they're doing just fine. No, these folks were fired because a right-wing influencer and conspiracy theorist apparently told the president to get rid of them. Because an internet troll, not an intelligence professional in any sense of the word, walked into the Oval Office and claimed that these officials were not sufficiently loyal to the president. National security be damned. In this troll's view, they were not sufficiently loyal to the president. How can we not see what's happening here? Or do we see it and just don't care enough to do anything about it? To say something, anything. They are betraying our national security, and they will do it again. They are turning their back on our closest allies and friends as they cozy up to dictators and murderers, and they will do it again. They are compromising the safety of our service members, and they will do it again. They are investigating the investigators, and they will do it again. They are prosecuting the prosecutors, and they will do it again, over and over again, because this administration has all the wrong priorities in all the wrong places. And who does that hurt the most? The American people. What are we supposed to say to families unable to sleep at night, worrying that their father or daughter or sister or brother may not come home from their deployment or may come home in a body bag because some administration official was sloppy handling war plans and their plane got shot down? The Houthis have air defenses. They can shoot down aircraft, and they have. The service members who volunteer to go into combat to keep us safe don't know if they can trust their own government to do the bare minimum to ensure their own safety. The plain, simple, indisputable fact of the matter is this: all of us are less safe because of this administration. We are lucky, damn lucky, that no one has died as a result of their repeated incompetence and mishandling of classified information. We are damn lucky. But it's got to change before our luck runs out and someone.
Unimaginable. President Obama also has a message for his fellow Democrats saying, and I'm quoting him now, "We're in one of those moments when you know what? It's not enough just to say you're for something. You may actually have to do something and possibly sacrifice a little bit," close quote. Former Vice President Kamala Harris is also weighing in, saying President Trump's actions have been largely predictable. Listen.
Each day in these last few months in our country, and it understandably creates a great sense of fear. Because, you know, there were many things that we knew would happen. Many things, I'm not here, so I told you so.
She said, "I told you so." Joining us now, CNN political commentator and Democratic strategist Paul Begala. Paul, thanks for joining us. President Obama also called out the silence from Republicans about the economic turbulence here in the United States and President Trump's attacks on his perceived enemies. What do you make of what we heard from the former president and the former vice president?
Well, President Obama is probably the most popular politician around. I saw a Gallup poll earlier this year, had him at 59%. Donald Trump never had a day in his whole life when he was at 59%. That's easier to be an ex-president, it is. And I think one of President Obama's great gifts in politics is timing. He's not out there in your face every day. He's the way Trump has to be, he's the president, okay? But he picks his moments and he knows what he is doing. He's the best sense of timing I've seen anybody since Ronald Reagan. And he is connecting right now. And it is both these grocery store issues, these cost of living issues, which is the most important. That's what's driving everything now. But also these more existential issues about our freedom. When you see people taken, handcuffed, and shipped to some hellhole in a prison in El Salvador without any due process. I'm glad Barack Obama's speaking out. I will also note, so is Joe Rogan. So if Donald Trump, okay, he's losing Barack Obama, he's also losing Joe Rogan, the very popular podcaster that Mr. Trump went on his show. Because Americans don't like that kind of lack of due process, and they sure don't like the costs going up at the grocery store the way they are.
A recent poll shows just 63% of Democrats view the party favorably right now. That's down from 81% at the start of the Biden administration. But according to Ron Brownstein, the columnist and good friend, these image problems might not matter much coming up in the 2026 midterm elections. He writes this. He writes that Democrats' best chance to recover would rely on their ability to, quote, crystallize public discontent with the actions by President Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress. You think he's right about that?
You know, it pains me to say this because I love the guy. Brownstein's always right, and he's right about this. Right now, by the way, I don't know how the Democratic favorable among Democrats is 63. I mean, we've known each other a long time. I've been a Democrat all my adult life. I wouldn't have a favorable opinion of my party right now. So, and yet the Democrats are winning. Stunning win in Wisconsin this week, where Ben Wickler, the state party chair, led his party to a really stunning, at the highest turnout I've seen in one of these Supreme Court elections. And so he's done a terrific job of coalescing that anger. The thing is, rage, which Democrats feel, is a wonderful motivator. It is. And so the Democrats are really angry. And by the way, that anger is spreading now. You know, it's not just, we're watching the stock market. But it's not just the stock market, it's also the supermarket. It's groceries, gas, and rent. Americans who hired Donald Trump, the ones in the middle, not the hardcore MAGA, and we love them, but they don't move around a lot. The people who moved and put Trump in, they put him in because the cost of living was too high. And he is raising the cost of their groceries, gas, and rent. I think Chris Van Hollen, who you interviewed earlier on this broadcast, has the right message for Democrats, which is the great betrayal. You know, Donald Trump won the voters who make less than $50,000 a year. That breaks my heart as a Democrat, but I admire it as a strategist. He won the heart of the working class, and now he's stabbing them in the back with higher costs on everything that they eat, drink, wear, drive. He's hurting the very people who put him into office, and that is bad politics as well as bad economic policy.
Always good to get your analysis, Paul. Thank you very, very much, Paul Begala.
Thanks, Wolf. Great to see you again.
If you have the people are going to rise up and going to tell the politicians, finally.
Okay, you might think that was from a recent town hall or protest. Actually, that is a Tea Party protester from 2010. That movement, which was largely motivated by anger at what they saw as an overreaching federal government under the control of a single party. That might sound familiar. A new op-ed from pollster and friend of the show, Kristen Soltis Anderson, has this warning for her party. Republicans better watch out. And she cites her latest poll, which found the emotion Democrats are most feeling right now is fury.
We are not interested in hearing that you are in the minority. We know that.
Feel betrayed or disappointed at not having a seat at these initial talks in Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think I'm really disappointed in what's happened. I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president. And I've been watching a war that would have never happened if I was president. And a war that would have never happened if I was president. And
Democrats are determined to call more witnesses when the Senate trial begins. They especially want to hear from the White House budget official who told the Pentagon to withhold military aid to Ukraine. New explosive documents show Michael Duffy made that phone call just 90 minutes after the controversial conversation between Trump and the president of Ukraine. Here's Jennifer Johnson.
House and Senate leaders still at an impasse over the Senate impeachment trial of U.S. President Donald Trump. Republicans want a quick trial, possibly with no witnesses. But Democrats are demanding to hear from White House insiders, including acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, former National Security Advisor John Bolton, and White House budget official Michael Duffy.
What is a trial with no witnesses and no documents? It's a sham trial.
Just released court-ordered documents show Duffy told the Pentagon to withhold military aid from Ukraine on July 25th, 90 minutes after President Trump asked Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden. And Duffy told the Pentagon to keep it quiet. Duffy was subpoenaed by the House in October but refused to testify. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is still withholding the articles of impeachment from the Senate until she's assured there will be a trial, prompting the president to lash out.
Crazy Nancy, she's crazy. No. So now she says, she has no case. She has no case. So let's not submit it. That's good, right?
Republican senators say Pelosi is holding back the articles because the case against the president is weak.
The case is pretty thin that the House is sending over us, if they ever send it over to us. Pretty thin gruel from my standpoint.
Democrats hitting back.
If he really believes it's thin because the President of the United States ordered his top people who were in the room, who have firsthand knowledge, not to testify. He ordered documents not to be turned over.
Senate Democrats are still demanding those witnesses and documents, but the Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, and they are in charge now, so that's unlikely to happen. As for those new Pentagon documents, White House officials say there is nothing new in them, as they predict a quick Senate trial and the president's acquittal. Robin?
Jennifer Johnson.
Invasion of Ukraine. All those people are dead. Putin's heinous attack on a proud and sovereign nation shocks the conscience of every person of goodwill. But it would have never happened in Ukraine. It would have never happened, 100% certain. In fact, it would have never happened in Ukraine. It would have never happened, 100% certain. In what's happened, I've been watching this for 3 years. It's a war that would have never happened if I was president. And
to force a foreign leader to aid his re-election. In turn, the president says he'll release the record of a critical phone call. Congressional correspondent Lisa Desjardins begins our coverage.
A dizzying day of developments. At the Capitol late this afternoon, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi went further than ever on formally beginning impeachment.
The actions of the Trump presidency revealed the dishonorable fact of the president's betrayal of his oath of office, betrayal of our national security, and betrayal of the integrity of our elections. Therefore, today, I'm announcing the House of Representatives moving forward with an official impeachment inquiry.
Meanwhile, at the United Nations, the president arrived this morning to talk about U.S. policy, but immediately faced questions about his own actions and whether he pressured Ukraine to investigate the Biden family.
I think it's ridiculous. It's a witch hunt.
He seemed to confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently.
My complaint has always been, and I'd withhold again, and I'll
To confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Confirm and defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently. Defend the fact that he withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in aid for Ukraine recently.
As well, but look what they have tucked into their pockets. They have little American flags just below the flag of their own countries sewn onto their sleeves. In the capital city of Lithuania yesterday, thousands of soldiers and dignitaries, and also just ordinary people, lined up in the streets to pay their respects and to honor 4 American soldiers who died in Lithuania this past week during a training exercise. The ceremony was attended by the president of Lithuania, who gave a speech on the occasion. He said that for Lithuanians, serving your country is not just a duty, but an emotion. And you could really see that among the people who gathered. Lithuanian citizens were moved to tears, moved to genuine grief. But again, this was a ceremony for Americans, for American soldiers. Officials arranged for an archbishop to bless the motorcade before it drove to the airport to start the process of returning those remains, returning those soldiers to the U.S. In our country, of course, it is a sacred tradition that when members of the armed services die in the line of duty overseas, their remains come home to the U.S. in what's called a dignified transfer. Their remains are flown home specifically to Dover Air Base with American flags draped over the coffins. It's a very somber, very important, very serious, very specific ceremony. And a dignified transfer is often attended by the President of the United States as a sign of respect from the Commander-in-Chief. After that very moving send-off from Lithuania and from the government and the people of Lithuania, the White House announced here in the United States that when those 4 young fallen American soldiers landed back home here in the U.S., President Donald Trump would not attend the dignified transfer. He would not be waiting at Dover to pay respects to the service members who died, even as Lithuania's president made sure he was there to see them off. Donald Trump has decided instead that he's going to Florida to watch a golf tournament and to go to a golf dinner tonight. You know, given his previous comments, I guess you could say this is consistent with his apparent level of investment on this issue. I got to tell you, we do not play a lot of tape of Donald Trump talking on this show. We sort of it's not a hard and fast rule, but kind of a rule of thumb on this show is that we try to cover what the president does rather than just what he says. He gets plenty of coverage for what he says. I prefer to focus on actions rather than his words. In this case, though, I'm going to make a little bit of an exception. I think what he said here is its own kind of action. I just want you to see it. It's very brief. This is how Donald Trump, President of the United States, responded when he was asked about the service members in Lithuania after they first went missing.
Mr. President, have you been briefed about soldiers in Lithuania?
Say it.
Have you been briefed about the soldiers in Lithuania who are missing?
No, I haven't.
Nope. What was it again that the Lithuanian president said about service? He said, for us, it is more than a duty, it is an emotion. For Donald Trump, it was, no, haven't heard anything about it. Next question. This, of course, all happens as Donald Trump has inexplicably fired the top 2 officials at the National Security Agency, the NSA, including the leader of the NSA is also the leader of Cyber Command, so that means he's also fired the head of Cyber Command. He also has fired 6 different people from the National Security Council. all reportedly on the basis of allegations made by a far-right conspiracy theorist. She is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist and also claims that multiple school shootings in our country were staged and weren't real. On her recommendation, he has fired a half-dozen people from the National Security Council and the head of the NSA. Joining us now is Senator Mark Kelly, Democrat from Arizona, member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senate is in the middle of marathon votes right now. He has kindly made time to join us from the Capitol Rotunda. Senator Kelly, I really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on, Rachel.
I wanted to ask your reaction to President Trump's decision to skip the dignified transfer. I mean, presidents don't always go to these ceremonies, let's be clear. Presidents in every administration have missed some of these. Donald Trump went to very few of these in his first term. Tonight, he's at a golf dinner in Florida.
Yeah, I think you do not want to get between Donald Trump and a golf tournament or the first tee. He puts that at a very high premium on his schedule. I think, what he said in the Oval Office about these missing soldiers just showed a total lack of empathy. And you're right, he's consistent. And this is a guy who, during his first term, called lost dead Marines who died at Belleau Woods suckers and losers. So we shouldn't be surprised.
The president reportedly fired 6 people off the National Security Council. And the director of the NSA and director of Cyber Command, as well as the deputy director of NSA, or she at least has been moved to another position. He was reportedly advised by a right-wing conspiracy theorist to do this. She seems to have come in alone with her own theories about why all these people should go, and the president acted on those theories and fired them. What do you think we should know about the impact of those firings and what you think about the means by which they were carried out?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't have an internet troll be in the White House's HR department, right? I mean, here's a person that clearly does not have the background and the knowledge and the information to make hiring and firing decisions in the White House, especially these kind of decisions. I knew General Hawk, the head of the NSA and Cyber Command, really, really well. He was doing an excellent job. He did not deserve to be fired. I mean, he's the kind of guy you want to keep in a position like this. And when you consider what has happened with the sharing of classified and sensitive information from the Secretary of Defense, the person the president should have fired was Pete Hegseth, who is totally unqualified for this job. So here's another example of where he keeps somebody in a position they shouldn't have, and that's putting us at risk. And then he fires the guy we really need in the job. And when you consider the role of the NSA and Cyber Command, it is, I almost can't think of a position that's more important. And on the function of those two organizations, I've noticed that it doesn't seem the White House places a lot of value in this. The president has said previously that he wants to take away some authorities that the NSA has to collect information on our foreign adversaries. So on this topic of NSA Cyber Command and personnel within our intelligence and defense communities, the president has it wrong.
Senator, we've had 2 remarkable days in the stock markets since President Trump announced his new tariff policy a couple of days ago. And it's historic simply in terms of the sort of size of the cataclysm in the markets. There is fear and trepidation and something approaching panic in business communities of all sizes, coast to coast, as American businesses try to figure out how they're going to contend with the new reality or whatever this new horizon is in terms of these tariffs. What do you think the impact will be in Washington to the disaster in the markets and the freak out in every state in the union as the American people contend with what this means for businesses and what it means for the price of living in this country?
Well, the price of living and the price of things is clearly going to go up. What I hope happens is my Republican colleagues in the Senate, but also in the House, get off the sidelines and call this for what it is. This is a really bad idea. But Rachel, I mean, as you pointed out, I mean, this is not surprising, right? Here's a guy who told Americans to inject bleach into their bodies, who sent a mob to Capitol Hill. And now I think it's fair to say that he stands out as single-handedly destroying more wealth with his bad decisions than anybody else that has ever lived on this planet. I can't think of another person. In a couple days, he has eliminated trillions of dollars. These are in people's 401ks. And this results in folks will lose their jobs because of this. Companies will have to restructure. People will be out of work. They're not going to be able to put food on the table. They're going to lose their homes. All because Donald Trump, as you pointed out, is listening to an economist that doesn't even exist, that Peter Navarro actually made up. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I've been looking for a real economist that says this is a good idea. I can't find one. The only people that say this is a good idea work directly for Donald Trump.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about $6 trillion and how much of an NIH that could fund. You know, what that could do for Social Security, what that could do. Well, how many park rangers we'd be talking about. It's just...
or you could actually cure childhood cancer, which is a thing he said he wanted to do. But instead, he cut money to NIH, the organization that would do that.
Senator Mark Kelly, I know tonight is a work night for you and all your fellow senators in the Capitol. Thank you so much for squeezing in some time for us to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
All right, much more to come here tonight. Stay with us. Friday night feels like it, right? That said, may I suggest that you go to bed kind of early, hydrate, eat your Wheaties in the morning, maybe put off the Friday night cocktail to make it a Saturday night cocktail this week, if at all. I'm only saying that because tomorrow is going to be very busy. Saturday is going to be very busy. I said at the top of the show there are more than 1,200 protests planned for tomorrow in all 50 states. I stand corrected. It is more than 1,300 protests planned in more than in all 50 states. It's expected to be the largest single day of protest since Donald Trump took office. Joining us now is Ezra Levin. He's co-founder of Indivisible, which is one of the groups that is promoting these events tomorrow. Ezra, thanks very much for joining us tonight. You were here just a couple of 3 weeks ago talking about the earliest idea for April 5th being sort of a hub for events all over the country and in Washington. How has the organizing gone? What has the response been compared to what you expected?
Gosh, Rachel, it's been incredible. Can I just say it has been incredible. We knew when we announced 3 weeks ago on the show that this was going to be the week where we saw an election in Wisconsin. We were cautiously optimistic about that election in Wisconsin for the Supreme Court. We didn't know we were going to kick Elon Musk's butt all across the state, but we were cautiously optimistic. We also didn't know that Cory Booker was going to give this incredible speech, inspiring all of us and telling us that he was taking a stand in response to pushes from his own constituents. And we also didn't know that Donald Trump was going to launch a global attack on the economies of not our economy, but the global economy. This confluence of events, this sense that they are overreaching so much, and there is a possibility to fight back and win, is leading to this just incredible response. As you said, more than 1,300 events every single state. Yes, you know, there are over 100 events in California. There are more than 60 in the state of New York, more than 50 in Washington. But it's not just blue states, Rachel. We see 17 events across the state of Montana, 14 across Alaska. This is everywhere. We're not just talking about one event in every state. We're talking about multiple, sometimes dozens of events. And these are normal, everyday people who are saying, hey, I've had enough. I've seen institutions fall. I've seen the universities. I've seen businesses. I've seen law firms not stand up, not support our liberal democracy. So what am I going to do as an individual? Well, I'm going to do my part. I'm going to show up. That's what tomorrow is about. And it's, gosh, Rachel, it is inspiring to see so many people hop on board this train.
The theme under which this is sort of loosely organized is hands off. I've seen people use all sorts of different types of phrasing around the different types of protests that they're going to be part of, and it seems like it's lots of different groups who are organizing, and in some cases it's no groups, it's just individual people who are coming out with their friends and neighbors. But it seems like the hands-off messaging is the most overarching phrase that we're going to hear tomorrow, and the most overarching idea, right?
One of the beautiful things about this is it's meeting people where they are. We're all coming to this for a different reason. We can say, hands off the Department of Education, hands off our Social Security, hands off our Medicaid, hands off trans kids, hands off our communities, hands off our civil rights, hands off our democracy. Different things are bringing different people to this fight. That's good. That's okay. We can all come together and say no. And that's what we're going to see tomorrow.
Yeah, Popular Front. Very, 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 very big tent. If for some reason you don't like what Donald Trump is doing to the country, there's a very large tent that is open to you. And people are going to be showing it in a very vivid way tomorrow. Ezra Levin, co-founder of Indivisible. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Kaya McClenny. Zakaya McClenny is a high school student from Pennsylvania. She's a clarinetist. She's a very, very good clarinetist. And last year, Ms. McClenny entered a contest that offered as its prize a chance to play with the famous U.S. Marine Band, which of course is a huge opportunity and a huge honor.
Did you think you were going to be chosen?
Yes.
You have a lot of confidence.
I do.
Why did you think you were going to be chosen?
I live my life with a lot of confidence.
Zakaya McClenny and 29 other young teenage musicians from around the country, they won that contest. They won the chance to play with the band they call the President's Own, the United States Marine Band. At least that was the plan. But then President Donald Trump signed an executive order banning diversity programs in the government and in the U.S. military. The contest that Zakaya had won is sponsored by a nonprofit called Equity Arc, and it provides instruments to students of color. It offers them mentoring and training to try to increase their representation in American classical music. But after Trump's order banning the government and the military from anything that relates to diversity, the Marine Band was forced to cancel the concert that they had been due to play with these kids after these kids had practiced and developed the repertoire and were ready to go. The Marine Band was not allowed to play with the students anymore because of the president's executive order. But then look what happened. You may have spotted Zakaya on clarinet there and some of her other fellow contest winners. After the U.S. Marine Band was forced to cancel their invitation to these young students, Equity Arc called up retired members of U.S. military bands to see if they'd do it, to see if they would like to play the concert with these talented young musicians instead. 60 Minutes did a big feature on this a few weeks ago. Retired musicians from the armed services from all over the country, they all agreed to fly to D.C. to play the concert with these kids, the concert that they had practiced for and developed the repertoire for, that they had earned. That was canceled because of Trump. That was last month, those retired musicians turning up just outside the nation's capital and then playing the concert, featured on 60 Minutes. Very moving, very cool. Turns out that was just the warm-up, because the governor of Illinois announced this week that the student musicians of Equity Arc have now been invited to play with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. It's happening this Sunday. Tickets are free. They apparently are still available. If you are going to be in the Chicago area this weekend, consider me jealous. All right, more ahead tonight. Stay with us. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. I will see you again Monday and every night next week at 9 p.m. Eastern. In the meantime, you can find me on Blue Sky. I don't know if you have Blue Sky yet, but I enjoy it. I have no connection to them other than the fact that I like it, but I do, and I don't like any other social media platform at all at this point. But you can find me on Blue Sky at maddow.msnbc.com. Now it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, even though it's Friday. Good evening, Friday, Lawrence.
Great to see you, Rachel. And I've been blue skying. And, you know, Rachel, the other night when you said, you told the audience that you weren't going to be here Thursday night because you were celebrating your anniversary with Susan, so America knew. And I was just wondering if you think that the New Yorkers who saw you out last night celebrating your anniversary with Susan you think they found it at all weird that I was with you? I hope,
Yes.
I hope not. I hope they get it, right? I mean,
it's Rachel and Susan's anniversary, and there's Lawrence and Stephanie Rule. Who are out,
it got
who are
complicated.
out there together.
It got complicated.
People think things are creepy at MSNBC, but I
Yeah.
don't think they think they're creepy that way.
It,
you know what I mean?
It was a public event. And Rachel, we have Senator Elizabeth Warren's going to run off the Senate floor and join us because she's got what I think is the absolute best idea about the Trump tariffs, which is to pass a congressional resolution. This can do this quickly. It's a one-sentence thing in the Senate and the House saying that no, the Congress is overruling, which they have the power to do by resolution, that Trump doesn't have to sign, doesn't get to sign, the Trump tariffs. In other words, Congress is simply going to reclaim the authority the Constitution gave them, complete authority, over tariffs. And that's the one that fixes it instantaneously. And I would assume that all those people at J.P. Morgan who've really, live in fear of Elizabeth Warren normally, are thanking her tonight for trying to save them and the world from the global recession.
Seriously, I mean, if you think about one thing that could do so much economic good in one fell swoop, in one sentence, you could solve like a $6 trillion problem that Donald Trump just created. You could do that, but it would also be this like profoundly counter-revolutionary act for the Congress to sit up and say, oh, yes, we exist. It is a tripartite system of government. It's not just the courts and Donald Trump. We also exist. We have a role. We are going to use it for the good of our country. It would, in one sentence, you could put the earth back on its axis.
Yeah, it really does work. And Chuck Schumer is going to join us. This is one of those Senate nights here at The Last Word because they're in one of those voting cycles that's going to go on well into the night. And I know there's been a lot of criticism of Chuck Schumer as a leader recently, and I know why. I get it. But what he's doing tonight is what he does very well in these situations, which is to construct these strategic amendments that they know the Republicans are going to vote against. They know they're going to be defeated, but these are designed as campaign tools for running against these Republicans, where you will have a vote in the Senate recorded tonight saying this senator voted to basically threaten your Social Security. This senator voted, a whole string of things about Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, and this is what they're up to tonight. Senator Schumer is going to brief us on how that's working.
I mean, just getting them to vote to continue the tariffs is going to tack most of them up to the billboard, honestly. Anyway, good luck, Lawrence. Thanks very
Rachel.
much,
Thank you. See you around town, Rachel.
No, never again. Never again.
I know. Have a great weekend. Well, on a day when the stock market completed its biggest drop in history, specifically caused directly and instantaneously by the actions of a president of the United States, Donald Trump spent the day in his golf cart. It was the perfect let them eat cake imagery of the Trump stock market collapse, which has now delivered official forecasts of a recession from J.P. Morgan and other economic forecasters. Donald Trump has at least finally achieved complete agreement that Trump tariffs are taxes on the American people, paid only by the American people. J.P. Morgan calls the Trump tariffs the biggest tax increases since 1968. Donald Trump's first vice president, Mike Pence, says the Trump tariffs are the biggest peacetime tax increase in history. On Tuesday, the first day of the latest round in the Trump stock market crash, Wall Street economic forecasters said a recession was possible because of the Trump tariffs. That was strong enough, they thought. By the end of the week, tonight, those forecasts are assuming a recession because of the Trump tariffs. That could mean millions of people losing their jobs because of Donald Trump. And it absolutely means price increases because of Donald Trump, big price increases. And today, Donald Trump spent the day in his golf cart, I guess, celebrating price increases. The man who ran for president, claiming that just electing him president would create a huge increase in the stock market and would decrease prices immediately on day one, now himself is the single biggest inflation threat in American history. And today, he spent the day in his golf cart. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Republican Jerome Powell, did not play golf today. In a speech today, Chairman Powell said Donald Trump's tariffs will, quote, include higher inflation and slower growth.
While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent.
In other words, the Trump price increases that are coming could last a very long time. They will last at least as long as the Trump presidency, if you believe Donald Trump and Trump administration officials who insist that Donald Trump will not change his mind about tariffs until virtually every automobile sold in America is made in America, which would really mean that the Trump tariffs would have to last forever. Tonight on social media, Donald Trump said, they are here to stay. JP Morgan raised the chances of a recession from 40% to 60%. In other words, JP Morgan is advising all investors to bet on a Trump recession. A Trump recession that JP Morgan says could do permanent damage to the American economy. JP Morgan issued those warnings in a report titled, There Will Be Blood. JP Morgan is not filled with dramatists who are in awe of the brilliant work of writer-director Paul Thomas Anderson, who gave us the deranged Trumpian 19th century businessman played by the Oscar-winning Daniel Day-Lewis in the 2007 film There Will Be Blood. JP Morgan used that movie title today deliberately on their report to try to get the attention of a madman who spent the day on golf courses because while he's destroying not just the American economy, but the worldwide economy. JP Morgan is now predicting a global recession. That's their term, global recession. Global, because of the relentless ignorance and stupidity of the man who spent the day in a golf cart. If you have any money in a retirement account, you have much less of it tonight, thanks to that man on the golf cart. If you somehow put together $100,000 in a retirement account, now you have $90,000, and it's going down. The man on the golf cart can be stopped. And Elizabeth Warren has a plan. Senator Warren will join us later in the hour with her plan to stop the Trump tariffs immediately. A bipartisan group of senators led by the senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, which has jurisdiction over tariffs, Republican Chuck Grassley, and Democratic Senate Finance Committee member Maria Cantwell, have introduced a bill that would require all of the Trump tariffs to expire after 60 days unless Congress writes those tariffs into law. Everyone in Congress knows that the Trump tariffs could never pass a vote in either the House or the Senate. Senator Warren has a plan for ending the Trump tariffs immediately, which I will leave to her to describe. Tonight on the Senate floor, Republicans are trying to push through the latest version of a Trump budget bill, while Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, offer a series of strategic amendments that will force Republicans to go on record casting votes on the Senate floor that can and will be used against them in the next election. And joining us now is the Democratic leader of the United States Senate, Chuck Schumer of New York. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to begin.
Hi, Lawrence.
Thank you. I want to begin with something in the Senate you would call a point of personal privilege, and it's something that the Republican Senator Bernie Moreno said about you. I'm going to read it to you. He said that Republicans are independently minded. This is a quote. Democrats are monolithic sheep that follow the Führer, Schumer's orders. What is your reaction to that, Senator?
It is despicable. It is outright anti-Semitism. I lost family in the Holocaust, relatives who were little babies and adults. And to use the word Führer in the same breath is just despicable, disgusting. He ought to apologize. It is outright anti-Semitism, no question about it.
Needless to say, Donald Trump has had no objection to Bernie Moreno using that word about you. That's the same Donald Trump who says that you are no longer Jewish.
Yeah, look, Donald Trump is, you know, he may not be an anti-Semite, but he certainly tolerates anti-Semitism in so many ways, calling me a Palestinian, you know, don't tell my mother. But also talking about in Charlottesville, both sides had good people. When he brings an anti-Semite like Fuentes to sit at his table at Mar-a-Lago, when the Great Replacement theory, which we all know is a conspiracy theory among the hard right, that Jews are trying to replace the white race with immigrants. Every other president, Lawrence, every other president, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, whether it's Reagan or Bush or Clinton or Obama, when there was bigotry, their job was to push it down. Donald Trump, he either revels in it or just lets it stay right there. That shows you one of the many, many reasons he doesn't deserve to be president.
Senator, you represent the state and the city where the stock market is located, the most important stock market in the world. That stock market now has spent a week suffering from the greatest drop in stock market history caused by the single action of a president. What do you say to Wall Street tonight?
What I say to Wall Street is this man is a menace. You know, Donald Trump, this is about the worst decision, or one of the worst decisions Donald Trump has made, and given his presidency, that's saying a whole lot. Why are they doing this? Why are they imposing such tariffs on people? I'll tell you, there's one reason, Lawrence. They want to use this money for tax breaks for billionaires. And they're making the average American family pay, it's now estimated about $5,000 a year. These are across the board tariffs, prices of everything, whether it's food or medicine or gasoline or a car or clothing or furniture or buying a home are going to go way up. And middle-class people are going to suffer for this, suffer dramatically. So will the economy. You know, when you're as uncertain and as erratic as Donald Trump is on issues like this, businesses don't spend money. Consumers, their confidence is lower than it's been in close to a decade. They don't spend money. It's just ridiculous. And the way they implement it, you either laugh or cry. They've actually put tariffs on penguins, but not on Putin, because in their tariffs are two islands, the Heard Island and McDonnell Island, which only have penguins on them. This is just government that is reckless. It is the bottom line, Lawrence. There's a group of hard right, angry billionaires. They always wanted to run the government. Donald Trump has let them run the government, and they are just hurting the country, betraying. Donald Trump is betraying the middle class, and people are seeing it. The stock market went down even before this happened. Look what happened in Wisconsin and even in Florida. The American people are seeing that Donald Trump lied to them in the campaign, is doing just the opposite of what he said. Remember, he said prices would go down on day one. Now with these tariffs, they're skyrocketing. They are seeing that he doesn't keep his promises, that he betrays them, and that his whole way of being is he's in this billionaire bubble with his friends Musk and Lutnick and people like that, and they just care about themselves.
Senator, Donald Trump has taken the full blame publicly. Every stock market analyst that you see on CNBC, many of whom are Republicans, every one of them blames the president's announcement about tariffs for what's happening in the stock market. But the Constitution of the United States gives total power over tariffs to the Congress. The Republicans who run the House of Representatives have the constitutional authority to originate the tariff legislation there. Right. Every Republican member of the House, every Republican member of the Senate has the power legislatively to block what Donald Trump is doing on these tariffs. When does the blame extend to them? How many days of grace do you think they should get before these tariffs are their tariffs?
Zero. And we're seeing, you know, all of these Republicans, even those who know Donald Trump is wrong, have just gone along with him in every way in obeisance. But for the first time today on tariffs, we're seeing a little bit of a crack. Senator Klobuchar has a bill with actually Senator Grassley, as you know, a Republican from Iowa, that says no tariffs unless Congress approves them. And they've gotten 4 or 5 Republican co-sponsors. Tonight, as we do the voting on reconciliation, I am introducing legislation that says no tariffs will go into effect if it raises prices in any way. We're going to ask our Republicans. We'll see how many of them vote with us. But if they don't vote with us and the prices go up, which they're inevitably going up, they will feel the heat. They're beginning to feel the heat, as shown by Klobuchar's bill. But I think there'll be a lot more heat on them in, day out, because this is the greatest this is the Trump tariff tax. It's hurting the middle class by more than anything. $5,000 a year. Prices go up across the board when inflation's been the #1 issue. I believe the Republicans will politically pay a very large price if they stick with Trump on these tariffs.
Senator, you have a long night ahead of you. It's one of those nights in the Senate, once again, where the Republicans are trying to push through a budget framework, budget resolution that will require a minimum of a $5 trillion increase in the national debt over time because of the Trump tax cuts and other provisions in this bill. You have a series of amendments which is traditional in these situations for the opposition to have amendments where you're going to try to pick away at what they're doing. Can you give us a preview, possibly, of some of those votes that we'll be seeing overnight? Because this is going to go well into the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, we're going to have amendments against these terrible tax breaks. We're going to have amendments on Social Security. They're trying to destroy Social Security. We're going to have amendments on the corruption and self-dealing of Musk and Trump. We're going to have amendments preventing these Medicaid cuts. We're going to have amendments stopping cuts to veterans. We're going to have amendments dealing with education cuts. It's going to be across the board, and we are going to show in every way how Donald Trump is doing things that hurt the middle class across the board, help the billionaires, and Republicans will vote against us at their political peril. The American people are totally against this, and we're beginning to see the signs of that. You saw what happened in Wisconsin, even in Florida, and you're going to see many more signs like this because, again, Trump betrayed the American people. He promised one thing in the campaign. He's doing the exact opposite. And on amendment after amendment after amendment, we are going to expose the Republicans and Trump for their hypocrisy.
And the way these things work, as you and I know, is it's extremely unlikely that you will win these amendments or any of these amendments. But what it is, and the leader's job tonight, your job tonight, is to give all of the Senate campaigns coming up the ammunition of the votes that you will force Republicans to cast tonight. Votes about Social Security, about Medicare, about Medicaid, that you can create campaign commercials about and about what
these things,
are indefensible.
These things are going to be so indefensible that Americans, come election time and even throughout the next year, will no longer want to support Republicans who embrace Trump. That is a goal of ours. Obviously, it will help us come election time, but we're fighting them every day. And my message to Democrats is, as bad as Trump is, and as bad as the American people are seeing he is, we have to fight every single day to show them what he's doing and what we will stand for in complete opposite of what Trump wants.